The year is 1939. The Great Depression and the Dust Bowl are finally coming to an end. World War II is beginning in Europe after the Nazis invade Poland. And The Wizard of Oz is coming out this year, along with the Oscar-winning Best Film of the Year, Gone with the Wind. 1939 was a year to remember for Americans of all ages. However, in 1939, Jim Crow laws were still in full effect in the South, making racism a social norm. Even in the North, public facilities routinely were segregated. Lynchings and burnings of African Americans was a well-known and, in many cases, a socially accepted activity, occurring mainly in the South, but also as far north as Minnesota and as far west as Washington State. The era of lynching lasted from about 1882 to 1965, peaking between the 1880s and the 1930s. Although many hated such horrible acts of hate and violence against African Americans, it was hard to enlighten those raised with racism and blinded by its cruel and unforgiving ways. However, in 1939, Billie Holiday would do just that, years before the civil rights movement would even begin.
Billie Holiday endured a difficult early life. Born Eleanor Fagan in 1915, she would later, in her teenage years, change her name to Billie Holiday, claiming that Eleanor Fagan was too long for anyone to say. Her mother, Sadie Fagan, was only 13 when Billie was born, and although present throughout her childhood, she never served as a good role model for the young Billie Holiday. Even at a very young age, Billie would walk out in the streets of Brooklyn and Harlem, cursing and getting into fights. At 14, she had to start paying bills and getting food on her own, so she joined a brothel, claiming she was 21. When the brothel was shut down, she was arrested and taken to a convent. Billie had difficulty following convent rules, however, and was subject to many cruel punishments. She stated herself that once, as punishment, the convent leaders forced her to sleep with the body of a dead girl for a night. When she was 22, she began her music career with Buck Clayton and Lester Young in the Count Basie Orchestra. It was Lester Young, the saxophonist, who would later give Billie her famous nickname, Lady Day. About 2 years later, Holiday left the band to become a solo artist. Billie Holiday thrived in the music industry, although she was constantly plagued by drugs and alcohol abuse. She performed in many venues throughout her career, but the place where she really made a name for herself was Cafe Society, the bar and restaurant where Billie first took her stand against racial injustice.
In 1939, Billie Holiday first sang the now famous song Strange Fruit in Cafe Society, the only racially integrated nightclub in New York at the time. Cafe Society opened in 1938, calling itself the wrong place for the right people, to mock the discrimination of most New York hangout spots. Strange Fruit was originally a poem written by Abel Meeropol, a Jewish schoolteacher who offered the poem to Billie Holiday to sing at Cafe Society. In 1971, Meeropol said, "I wrote Strange Fruit because I hate lynching, and I hate injustice, and I hate people who perpetuate it." Though Holiday wasn't comfortable singing the explicit song at the start, Strange Fruit had a very personal meaning to her. Her father, Clarence Holiday, died from pneumonia in 1937 after being denied treatment due to prejudice and racism. Judy Blesh, a jazz critic, later states, lynching, to Billie Holiday, meant all the cruelties, all the deaths, from the quick snap of the neck to the slow dying from all kinds of starvations. Holiday believed no one would appreciate the song's powerful message because lynching was almost a socially accepted practice at the time, particularly in the South. However, after agreeing to perform the song, she first sang Strange Fruit at Cafe Society in 1939. After this performance of the eerie song, the crowd was silent, and she was terrified thinking everyone hated it. Suddenly, a lone person started nervously clapping. Then the audience was in an uproar of applause. Later, all who heard the song recalled the physical and mental toll it took upon their bodies. They described it as cutting, stabbing, and strangling of their mind and soul. It was her own personal protest against racism and cruelty to African Americans at the time. Strange Fruit was not the first protest song, but it was the first to directly address racism poetically and as entertainment. Recording producer Ahmet Ertegun called Strange Fruit a declaration of war, the beginning of the civil rights movement. Because of its strong meaning and political nature, Holiday integrated Strange Fruit into her nightly repertoire, and every time she sang the song, everything would stop. The waiters would stop serving and move to the back of the room. The bar would close, and everything went quiet, and the lights would turn off. The only thing that could be seen was Billie Holiday illuminated by a single spotlight, and the only thing that could be heard was the gut-wrenching lyrics of the morbid and poetic song.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
By the time Billie Holiday was in her 20s, she had created a style of jazz that anyone could recognize as her own. A woman who saw Holiday sing Strange Fruit described it to a TV network as real people doing things that really mattered to them. Billie Holiday opened the eyes of people from all ethnicities to the cruelties of racism. She was hated, but also loved for her courage and leadership.
Scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh.
Even today, 70 years since her career ended prematurely from years of heroin and alcohol abuse, many still know who Billie Holiday is and know her song, Strange Fruit. It is the song that made her known, and it is the song that made people remember her and her message, for it was an early pivotal point in the start of the civil rights movement. The song is a superb outcry against lynching, remarkable because the lyrics aren't too pretentious for the simple blues language, says the left-wing press the news masses. Modern artists such as Nina Simone, Annie Lennox, and Woody Guthrie still cover the song. The song was even named one of the top 10 most influential songs of the century. What really made people remember Billie was her unique voice, emotive interpretations, and talent as a musician and recording artist. Her life has become a story of a successful artist of color struggling to survive in a racist and often hostile society. Billie survives not only in her music, but also in the remembrance of her courageous outcry against racism.